Hello and welcome to the first managerial change of the Championship from the Sport Podcast. I'm Craig Savage and this is Mr. Daniel Cody to my side. First of all, it's been a while since I've been on the channel and I'm on the channel. You know what that means. There's been a managerial change in the Championship. First managerial change of the Championship season, and it's not Watford, surprisingly. It's actually Huddersfield Town. Neil Warnock has left the club and he's been replaced by Darren Moore. Let's start off with Neil Warnock. He came in at a very tricky period and obviously kept Huddersfield up very close near the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned it is they had a terrible run. They made the wrong appointment in the middle of last season after making the wrong appointment at the start of last season. And then finally they got it right at the third attempt. And Neil Warnock probably deserves, well, I know that most EFL fans love him, but he deserves a lot of credit for the job he's done here because in the grand scheme of things, it is remarkable. Obviously, he was tempted out of retirement by the previous owner, and we know that probably we'll have to talk about the ownership change a bit later because that's what's led to this managerial change. But to come in the position they were, I think even we were asking, and certainly Charlie, who I think featured in that manager special, said, even for Neil Warnock, is this a bit too much, this task? And he did it pretty comfortably in the end, which is just mind-blowing. Some of the results he picked up, the run he got on, he had centre-half scoring left, right and centre. And most importantly, he got the fan base back on board and unified the club again and leaves them in a far better position on and off the pitch than he joined them in, which is an incredible effort. It's remarkable in itself they're a Championship club. And I was thinking about this on the way home. It's one of the weirdest manager specials we'll probably do for a while because we've got a manager going out who's not really been sacked for doing a poor job, but just because of timing, and a manager coming in who wasn't sacked in his previous job, but won a Wembley playoff final in his last game. I mean, it's a pretty ridiculous turn of events, but Neil Warnock deserves massive credit. I mean, even going into his departure, 3 games unbeaten, I'm glad they got the equaliser against Stoke to send him off with at least a result. And I think the appreciation he got at the end, probably from both sets of fans, one of them ironically as well, just shows you the impact he's had. He's a man who is synonymous with this division and on and off the pitch did a very, very good job at Huddersfield Town the second time around.
Yeah, Neil Warnock obviously leaving, it feels a bit weird because obviously no one really saw this coming. Obviously, the new owners tempting Neil Warnock to stay on. What I don't. This is a bit strange for me. They've waited to the summer, obviously, to say, yeah, okay, you stay in charge. But once we find the right, then obviously we'll go for that person. But with Warnock doing an all right job, obviously this month's been pretty good. 7 points out of 9 in September. It does feel a bit strange.
Yeah, it was just the timing, I think, that was a little bit weird because obviously it's so early in the season. And I'm guessing based on who it is and what happened last summer, it's probably just that with the LMA and his previous club that he's managed to get all of his payments and compensations and whatever else sorted. But I think for Neil Warnock, we knew this was going to happen eventually. I don't think we expected it in the middle of September. And obviously off the back of a few good results, it seems a little strange. But I agree with you in your initial statement there that they're probably replacing him with a good man. And it's just a weird situation, isn't it? A good manager going out, a good manager coming in. And what a nice treat as a manager to come into a side that are 3 unbeaten where you've probably not got to change a great deal, albeit we know the style of play of the new manager, and that probably is going to lead to some change. So that's the only question mark I've got as we get into the new man, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, I think the timing's a bit off. It's a shame for Neil Warnock it is so early, but in a way, looking at the run of fixtures coming up, it probably means that he gets to go off on an unbeaten run, which he might have otherwise not had the chance to do.
One final question on Neil Warnock. Is this the end or does he have one more run?
He will be back by the end of February at the latest. And my predictions now are split down the middle between QPR and Cardiff for another old club return.
But unfortunately, that's the end of Neil Warnock's time at Huddersfield. But let's talk about the new man in charge. And he's left one Yorkshire team this summer and he's joined another. It is big Darren Moore. He's the new manager. The timing is obviously his contract is undisclosed. But the statement from Huddersfield Town is as follows. Darren 49 was a standout first choice following extensive recruitment process led by Chief Executive Jake Edwards and Sporting Director Mark Cartwright. He joined the town on the back of successful promotion campaign with Sheffield Wednesday last season and to his managerial experience in the Premier League and Sky Bet Championship with West Bromwich Albion. Chief Executive Jake Edwards said, "We're proud to have secured the services of Darren Moore. A lot of time, effort, and analysis went into making sure we found the right manager for this club, and Darren emerged as a standout candidate to help us achieve our short-term objective of stability and long-term vision of growth and development." Darren has a track record of success as a player at this level, but more importantly, as a manager. He has gone into clubs and revolutionized cultures into winning ones on the back of real challenges like relegation. He's turned things around at West Bromwich Albion and Doncaster Rovers to make them into promotion contenders and steer Sheffield Wednesday back to the Sky Bet Championship last season. The sporting director Mark Cartwright explained, we're very clear on the skill sets that we wanted from our new manager, and Darren hit the key points. We want a manager who has a proven track record of high performance, and Darren's record has been fantastic. They're just copying each other's statements here, the way they're going.
It's very long and unnecessary, isn't it?
They're both the same. They both said the same thing. Right. Boring statements aside, because they both said the same thing. Obviously, we both feel this is the right appointment. This seems a really good fit.
It does, and it seems a logical fit. It leads to a rare situation where the same man has been talked about in two manager specials for a row, which normally never happens outside of Watford. So fair play to Darren Moore for making that history on the channel. But like we said a bit earlier on, he's coming into this job off success, which you don't often get with a manager. He's not been sacked. He's not been in a situation where he's had dismal form. He's just come off one of the greatest playoff semi-final comebacks in the world. And then he's gone and won a final at Wembley and got Sheffield Wednesday back to the Championship. I mean, you can't ask for much more. So there's a lot of positives there. I mean, you look at his win rate across his career as a manager, and it is exceptional. I mean, at West Brom, I remember us when we first started this podcast, he was sacked with them up in third or fourth place after they came down, and he nearly kept them up after taking them in a perilous position in the Premier League. He did a very good job there, turned Doncaster around before leaving them for Wednesday, and obviously we all know what happened there last season. Win rate of over 50% at Wednesday, but not just that. It was the way they played as well. They scored goals galore. They were attacking. They were front-footed. Okay, a little susceptible at the back at times, but I think it's one of the things that Neil Warnock did bring back a bit at Huddersfield, albeit in a very different style, was the actual ability to be a front-footed side rather than just being scared and playing for a defensive 0-0, which did start to happen at the end of other reigns. So I think, albeit they'll probably get there via different methods, it is a similar fit in terms of character and style. And I do feel that Darren Moore is likely to be a success at Huddersfield. My problem is he going to be given the time to get through this season? Because Huddersfield on paper, and it's my opinion, I know Neil Warnock said otherwise this week, I don't think it's the strongest squad in the Championship, and I would argue it's one of the weakest 7 or 8 on paper, probably. And particularly given the fact they've had knocks, they've had injuries, they've had whatever else. That gives me cause for concern. If they have a little poor run, I mean, we were looking at it just before we came on here. They've got Coventry and Ipswich the next 2 games. They're not going to be easy, are they? So is he going to be given time if they have a little poor run? Is he going to be backed in January? If so, and if they get through this season, I can see the long term being rosy. But for me, the key part for this Darren Moore tenure, if it's going to be a long-term project, is just getting through this year. Because if Huddersfield can have a stable year where they survive relatively comfortably, then from that point on, I think he's going to fly.
Yeah, no, I think this is as I said, it's a solid appointment. Obviously, there's chopping and changing, obviously, throughout the club this last few months. Obviously, new owners now involved. But this feels like they've really come up with a plan and not rushed and go, right, we're going to hire Fotheringham, whatever his name was, just for the sake of it. We're going to hire Dan Schofield because he was already at the club before and we couldn't be bothered to do a recruitment process. And we thought we'll just go for him because he's there. With all due respect to both men. But they want to get things right. They've obviously kept Warnock in for that little bit steady for the time being. Wanted to get their own feet settled rather than just come into the club and go, right, Warnock, you're out. I'm going to get this guy in. They've taken their time over this, which is, I think, is a bit of a difference compared to different owners who go, yep, we want this guy in because we don't like this guy already.
Warnock, to be fair, has allowed that as well, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think Neil understands that as well. Obviously, if this was back in the mid 2000s, I don't think he'll allow that, to be honest. So I think obviously more mature in his age. He's allowed that, I think, and that's the respect between the owners and to Warnock.
It just seems a move that works for all parties. And Neil Warnock will get another job. He'll get another calling card, and it'll probably be another one of his former clubs that he cares deeply about. So I'm sure it won't hit him too bad. And his stock, after people asking if he could do it out of retirement, is going to rise and rise and rise from this one. For Darren Moore, it is a good long-term fit. And as you say, it does all seem quite sensible so far from the new Huddersfield owners, which is often a worry, particularly with what we've seen in the Premier League in recent seasons from new owners from that part of the world. So it definitely is something that should be looked on with optimism. They've got a young squad, they've got a hard-working squad, and they seem to have a lot of good characters in the club. It's something Neil Warnock always talks about and always builds. We saw that with Middlesbrough previously. So there's definitely the foundations there for Darren Moore. It's just whether he can build the side. But even him, I know it doesn't look like the longest tenure in the world. You look at his last two jobs at Sheffield Wednesday and Doncaster, they average out at about 2 years each, which by championship standards is remarkable. So if he can do that again here, I think he'll probably leave them in a pretty good position. The only worry for me is, yes, he's fortunate he's got 4 days before his first game because they're the last fixture of the match day, which again, maybe timing-wise works out. And of course, he's got an international break in a couple of weeks, but I do worry about those first couple of games away at Coventry and at home to Ipswich, who are flying. So they're my only slight concerns. Of course, his 4th game in charge, the last one before the international break, away at Hillsborough against Sheffield Wednesday. I'm sure he's got that one in the bookmarks, but I do worry a little bit about their start. But that game is going to be one hell of a one to be at.
Well, I was going to get onto the fixtures, but I had another question before, but you already jumped ahead to the fixtures, but I will go back to that fixture.
Just in case anyone thinks these are scripted, eh?
Well, the question that I was going to ask was, what are you actually looking for in Darren Moore and this Huddersfield side?
Look, the way they're going to play, he can't change too much immediately because of the players he's got. But the fact they've got a relatively young side, they can be quite energetic. They can be hardworking. They've still got a few bits of an experienced core. I know he wasn't always popular with Luton fans, but Lee Nichols is one of the best keepers in the Championship. There's no doubt in that whatsoever. Obviously, Sorba Thomas, who I think we ridiculed for being sent out on loan last January, is back and looking good in the last week or two. Redoni starting to score goals. Matty Pearson's popping up with goals left, right and centre under Neil Warnock. There are some good players in that team, and they've added a little bit of dynamism from what they were missing at the start of last season, where they were quite a disjointed team that relied on set pieces from what we saw under Fotheringham and Schofield before that. So definitely got the opportunity to play the way Darren Moore would like to, but it's going to take time. I'm a bit worried about his usual defensive record compared to what Huddersfield are going to need this season. But you say that Neil Warnock's tenure has been built on attacking and goals rather than clean sheets. So maybe it's just the way this Huddersfield team play. I do feel it will be a good fit in the long term, but it's just about getting through that first couple of months. And if Darren Moore does that, I think they'll be absolutely fine.
Right, let's go back now. Obviously, we're going to talk about the fixtures. As you said, Coventry up on the Monday Night Football. That's going to be live on Sky. And then Ipswich at home for the rest of the month. So 2 very tough games, as you said. Obviously, Coventry not as high up in the table as probably some people expected, but obviously they're a very tricky side anyway. Ipswich flying at the moment in 3rd place. And then there's Birmingham, who's doing really well. Obviously, the big game you said on the 7th against away at Sheffield Wednesday. And then after the international break, is QPR at home and Cardiff at home. So overall, it's a bit of a mixed month of tough, winnable games. How do you see that happening for Darren Moore and this side?
Well, I think the first 3, it's just about getting through okay. I mean, you mentioned Coventry aren't as high up. They've been draws galore this season. So I think he'd probably bite your hand off to take a draw on the opening day if he can. There are going to be trickier days ahead, and Sheffield Wednesday obviously is going to be an emotive game, which is going to be quite difficult, but they've been very poor at the start of this season and look unlikely to score too many goals against any opposition. The big ones for me is if he can get to the international break with an okay start. You mentioned those first 2 games after, QPR and Cardiff. Based on what we said at the start of the season, the bottom third of the table, we would expect those 2 sides to be there, and they're going to be huge for Huddersfield in terms of this season. Before that, if he can pick up odd points here and there, think he'll be relatively happy. I mean, we've got to bear in mind, we said at the start of the season that Huddersfield would stay up purely on Neil Warnock being there. So we have to have respect for Darren Moore if we don't think that's going to change now. But yeah, I think he's got to get through the first 4 with a few points if he can. Doesn't matter if it's a few draws. And then Huddersfield at home to QPR and Cardiff. They are the first 2 big ones after the international break, and probably where he needs to pick up the points.
So let's have a quick prediction on the future of Darren Moore and Huddersfield. How do you think he'll be doing over the rest of this season and hopefully in years to come?
Well, it sounds like a negative, but it's really not. I think I'm probably less confident that they stay up now than I was when they were managed by Neil Warnock, but I think that would apply to virtually any manager because Neil Warnock was a shoo-in to keep them up. With Darren Moore, there's maybe that 5% of risk, but I still think he's a very good appointment. I think he's the right man for the job, but Neil Warnock is a shoo-in to keep you in a championship. If he gets through the first couple of months, I think he'll be fine. I think we'll see a few signings in January to suit his style. And I think we're going to see entertaining football and games where the fans can get behind them, which is something that he used well at Hillsborough last year and Neil Warnock used well here. So it makes perfect sense. I think they'll stay up still because there are some really poor sides at the start of this season, particularly away from home. And I do think he might get a little bit longer. Obviously, it's always going to depend on the start of next year. And we know about the average lifespan of a championship manager, but I'm going to stick my neck on the line and say he may outlast the usual 11-month stint of a championship manager and make it past the 1-year mark. I think he'll still be here at this time next year. And if he gets the right backing, I could see them being, it's a progression for me over 3 years. Survive this year pretty comfortably, finish in the middle of the table next year, and then try and push on the year after that. Because we know the club's been in the Premier League in the last, 5 or 6 years now. They've got the infrastructure to do it. So it's just about time. And it's a big rebuild needed because they got things wrong on and off the pitch for a while. And the new owners will make mistakes as they go along as well. But they need to be patient with the manager because the Championship is an unforgiving league. It's very competitive and it's very easy to panic, as we saw by the 27 or whatever manager specials we did last year. So hopefully they'll stay patient and we won't have that many this time around. But I don't think Huddersfield will be a repeat offender this year.
No, I don't think Huddersfield will be a repeat offender. I think you have to trust him. Obviously, you look at the longevity of his previous 2 appointments at the other Yorkshire. It's not just a Yorkshire.
It's great for him. He doesn't have to move, does he?
He doesn't have to move. But I hope longevity-wise he stays there. I hope he gets given time, a good season and a half for him. Let him have a full season. But I think Darren will be absolutely fine. And hopefully these new owners are not like other owners in the Championship and sack managers hit left, right, and centre. So yeah, I think this is a good appointment. And that is our chat on the appointment of Darren Moore at Huddersfield Town as their new manager. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the Honest Football Podcast. While you're on YouTube, you can check Daniel Cody's Championship predictions from the weekend gone. Obviously, he'll tell you how Huddersfield will get on against Coventry, so keep an eye on that. And also check the YouTube shorts for League One predictions as well. I'm Craig Savage, that's Daniel Cody. See you next time.